In the quiet village of Oakhaven, nestled between towering peaks and the glistening shores of a sparkling lake, there was an old legend whispered among the villagers, passed down from generation to generation. It was said that on certain moonlit nights, a hidden meadow would appear, where dreams were born and restless hearts found peace. The villagers called it the Dreamer's Meadow, a place so tranquil that it seemed almost unreal, yet many who had wandered too far into the wild had claimed to have seen it, only to find it vanished by morning. Alara was a young traveler, weary from her journey across the vast and dangerous lands. For days, she had wandered alone, her only companions the birds above and the winds that whispered through the trees. Her feet ached, her body heavy from the endless walking, and her mind burdened with thoughts of the unknown future. She had no destination, no purpose other than to walk, to escape a world that no longer felt like home. Her journey had started weeks before, when she had left her village behind, seeking something she couldn't name. It wasn't that life in her village had been unbearable, no, she had family, friends, a roof over her head, but something deep inside her had shifted. The constant rhythm of village life felt constricting, as though the world was too small, the sky too low. Alara longed to feel something greater, something that could fill the growing emptiness in her heart. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alara found herself deep within the forest, miles from the village. The tall trees cast long shadows across the path, and the air was cool with the promise of nightfall. She paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow, her eyes scanning the surrounding woods. The path was unfamiliar, a winding trail that she had not noticed before. The landscape had changed since morning, and something about the air felt different. A strange, almost electric tension hanging in the cool breeze. As she stood there, listening to the silence of the forest, she caught a glimpse of something through the trees, a faint light, soft and inviting, glowing like a distant star. She felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it were calling her, beckoning her to come closer. Without thinking, Alara took a step forward, then another, and soon she was moving through the underbrush, the sound of crunching leaves beneath her feet the only sound in the otherwise still night. The light grew brighter the deeper she ventured, and soon, the trees parted to reveal a clearing. It was unlike anything Alara had ever seen before. The Dreamer's Meadow lay before her, bathed in a soft, silvery glow that seemed to pulse with life. The air smelled of lavender and fresh rain, and the grass was soft beneath her feet, bending and swaying as if it were alive. It was a meadow that seemed untouched by time. Perfectly still and serene, as though the world had held its breath for this one moment. The stars above twinkled, their light refracted by the ethereal glow that surrounded the meadow, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Alara stood at the edge of the meadow, entranced by its beauty. The soft rustling of leaves in the trees, the gentle breeze that caressed her skin, and the distant call of an owl in the trees were the only sounds that broke the silence. Her eyes drifted to the center of the meadow, where a small pond lay, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the moonlight like a perfect mirror. She stepped forward, drawn by the calmness of the place. The air felt cool and fresh against her skin, and she couldn't help but let out a long, contented sigh. Everything here was perfect, untouched by the troubles of the world. As if the very earth itself whispered to her, urging her to let go of her worries and simply be. Alara felt the weight of her journey. The pain in her feet, the exhaustion in her bones, slowly began to melt away. She found a soft patch of grass beneath a tall tree and sank down into it, letting out another sigh as she closed her eyes, resting her head on the earth. The world around her seemed to blur, as though she were being wrapped in the embrace of a dream. The ground beneath her was firm yet soft, the air filled with the sweet scent of flowers and moss, and the sounds of the night felt distant, like an echo from another world. For the first time in days, Alara felt at peace, as if this place was exactly where she was meant to be. Her mind began to quiet, and as she lay there, gazing up at the stars, she felt herself drifting. She wasn't asleep, not yet, but she could feel the gentle pull of slumber tugging at the edges of her consciousness, promising her a rest unlike any she had ever known. Alara slept soundly that night, and for the first time in ages, she dreamed. She found herself standing on the edge of a vast forest, one unlike any she had seen before. The trees were tall and ancient, their bark twisted and gnarled, their leaves a deep shade of emerald that shimmered in the pale moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the distant call of birds echoed through the stillness. The forest seemed alive, humming with magic and ancient secrets. Alara took a step forward, the cool grass beneath her feet soft and welcoming. She moved deeper into the forest, her heart light and curious, drawn by something she could not explain. The path before her was narrow, winding between trees and over streams, and though she had never been here before, she felt no fear. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if the forest itself were inviting her to explore. As she walked, she noticed that the trees seemed to whisper to her, their branches swaying in the breeze, their leaves rustling as though speaking in a language she could almost understand. The ground beneath her feet was soft with moss, and the air was thick with the scent of wildflowers. Alara felt as though she were moving through a dream, a place that was both familiar and new, as though she had walked here before, though she had never set foot in this forest. She walked for what felt like hours, the path stretching on ahead of her. And yet, time seemed irrelevant in this place. The moon hung high above, casting a gentle glow over the world below, and the stars twinkled softly in the sky like distant watchers. Eventually, Alara came to a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing was a small pond, its surface smooth and reflective like glass. The moonlight bathed the water in a soft, ethereal glow, and for a moment, Alara simply stood there, mesmerized by its beauty. Then, a voice called to her from across the pond. "Welcome, child." Alara turned to find an old woman sitting by the water's edge, her long silver hair flowing down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her face was kind and warm, her eyes full of wisdom and understanding. She wore a robe of deep blue, the color of the night sky, and her presence seemed to fill the entire clearing with an otherworldly peace. The old woman smiled at Alara, her voice gentle. "You have come to find peace, haven't you?" Alara nodded slowly, her heart suddenly full of emotion. "Yes," she said softly. "I've been searching for something I cannot name." The old woman patted the ground beside her, inviting Alara to sit. "Rest here, child. All your answers will come in time." Alara sat beside the woman, feeling the weight of her journey, of the long days spent walking alone, finally begin to lift. The old woman turned her gaze to the pond, and Alara followed her lead, gazing into the water. At first, it seemed empty, but then, slowly, images began to form within the rippling surface. This begins the story's expansion into sections. Would you like me to continue in this manner, developing each chapter in this level of detail? Each subsequent chapter will keep expanding on the journey, character interactions, and the deeper mysteries of the Dreamer's Meadow. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft, silvery glow across the clearing. Alara's eyes were fixed on the surface of the pond, which now shimmered with strange, beautiful images, visions that danced like reflections of distant memories. The water seemed to come alive with stories, each ripple revealing something new, something magical. She could barely contain her wonder as she watched the images shift before her. There were landscapes she had never seen before, sprawling cities with towering spires made of stone and glass, their streets bustling with people she didn't recognize. In the distance, she saw an ocean, its waves crashing against the rocks in a wild, untamed rhythm. There were forests far more ancient than the one she now stood in, their trees twisted and gnarled, their roots reaching deep into the earth. But it wasn't just the landscapes that intrigued her. The pond showed her people, too. There were faces, some familiar, some strange, each with their own stories. There was a woman with eyes like the stormy sea, a young man with hair like silver moonlight, and an old warrior with a scar across his cheek, his eyes burning with fierce determination. "Who are they?" Alara asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old woman beside her smiled softly. "They are fragments of your dreams, child. Not just dreams of the night, but dreams of the heart. They are the echoes of what you've seen and what you've yet to see. Some are from your past, others from your future, and many from paths you have yet to walk. But how can I see them?" Alara asked, her gaze still fixed on the swirling water. The old woman chuckled, a sound like wind rustling through leaves. Because this is the dreamer's meadow, child. Here, the boundary between dreams and reality is thin. You are free to explore both worlds, if only you have the courage to seek them. But be warned, dreams are not always what they seem. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine at the woman's words, but her curiosity pushed her forward. What do you mean? The old woman looked at her with knowing eyes, her smile fading into something more serious. Dreams have power. They can lead you to the answers you seek, but they can also mislead you. They are shaped by your desires, your fears, and your choices. And sometimes, they can show you things you are not ready to see. Alara turned her gaze back to the pond. The images within the water were changing again. This time, the vision was darker, more turbulent. She saw herself standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast, storm-tossed sea. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating a ship that seemed to be struggling against the wind and waves. Is this my future?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The old woman remained silent for a moment, her gaze soft but piercing. Then she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Some of it is, yes. But remember, child, the future is not set in stone. It can be shaped, just as dreams can be shaped. You have the power to change your path, to decide who you will become." Alara took a deep breath, the weight of the old woman's words settling over her. For a moment, the vision in the pond seemed to shift again, and she saw herself walking alongside a tall, shadowy figure. The figure was dressed in dark robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. In his hand, he held a lantern that flickered with an eerie, greenish light. The scene was cold and desolate, the ground beneath their feet cracked and barren. "Who is he?" Alara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old woman's face grew serious as she gazed into the water. "That is a shadow of your fears, child. A part of you that is afraid of what lies ahead. But do not worry. Fears can be faced. They can be overcome." "But how?" Alara asked, her heart racing at the sight of the figure in the vision. The old woman placed a hand on Alara's shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. "By choosing your path. By trusting in yourself and the strength you hold within. The journey ahead will not be easy, but you are never truly alone, not as long as you hold on to your dreams." Alara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the old woman's words wash over her like a calming wave. The fear that had clenched around her heart began to ease, replaced by something new, something she had not expected to find in this strange place. A sense of hope. The old woman's voice broke through her thoughts once more. "Now, child, it is time to rest. The dreams you seek are waiting for you, but you must be ready to meet them with an open heart." Alara nodded, feeling her eyelids grow heavy. She lay back on the soft grass, her body sinking into the earth as if it were a warm embrace. The meadow around her seemed to hum with energy, the stars above twinkling like tiny beacons in the night sky. As she drifted into sleep, the visions in the pond faded, and the world around her grew still. But even as she closed her eyes, she could feel the presence of the old woman beside her, the weight of her words lingering in the air. The first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting a soft golden glow over the meadow. Alara awoke slowly, stretching her limbs as she felt the coolness of the morning dew on her skin. The meadow was still, its peaceful silence only interrupted by the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. For a moment, she wasn't sure if the events of the night had been real. Had she truly spoken to the old woman? Had the pond really shown her visions of her future? Or had it all been part of a dream? She stood up, brushing the grass from her clothes, and turned to look around the meadow. It was just as serene as it had been the night before, the soft glow of the moon now replaced by the warmth of the morning sun. But there was something different now, something deeper. Alara could feel the magic of the place pulsing in the air, as if the land itself was alive with possibility. She walked to the edge of the pond once more, gazing down at its smooth surface. The water was calm now, but it was no longer empty. There was a small, delicate flower floating on the surface, its petals a soft shade of blue. It was unlike any flower Alara had ever seen before, and she reached down to gently touch it. The moment her fingers brushed against the petals, a wave of warmth spread through her body, and she felt a surge of energy course through her veins. The flower was alive with magic, and for a brief moment, Alara felt as though she were connected to something greater than herself, something ancient and eternal. The pond's surface shimmered once more, and for the briefest of moments, Alara thought she saw the old woman's face reflected in the water, smiling at her with a knowing look. Then, just as quickly, the reflection faded, leaving her alone in the quiet meadow once more. But Alara no longer felt alone. With each passing day in the Dreamer's Meadow, Alara began to understand more about the strange and magical world she had found herself in. The meadow, it seemed, was not just a place of rest, but a place of transformation, a place where the dreams of the heart were allowed to unfold and take root. Days passed in the Dreamer's Meadow, and each morning, Alara found herself waking to a world that seemed both familiar and otherworldly, as though time itself moved differently in this magical place. The peace that had once felt like an unfamiliar gift now felt like a part of her, woven into the very fibers of her being. She no longer questioned how or why she had ended up here. Instead, she embraced the serenity, allowing herself to simply exist within the tranquil rhythm of the meadow. One morning, after a deep, dreamless sleep, Alara woke with a feeling she hadn't experienced in days: curiosity. A soft, unexplainable pull tugged at her heart, a sense of something new waiting to unfold. It was as if the meadow itself was calling her to explore its depths, to uncover something hidden just beyond her reach. She stretched her limbs and stood up, her eyes sweeping the meadow as the first rays of the sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the grass. She noticed a faint path that hadn't been visible before. It was winding, barely visible among the overgrown wildflowers, yet there was something about it that beckoned her forward. Without hesitation, Alara stepped onto the path. The ground beneath her feet was soft, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and fresh earth. As she moved deeper into the meadow, the world around her seemed to change. The colors of the flowers deepened, their hues more vivid, and the trees grew taller, their branches reaching higher into the sky. The soft hum of magic, once faint, was now louder, as though the land itself were alive with purpose. The path wound its way through the meadow, leading her to a secluded grove surrounded by tall, ancient trees. In the center of the grove stood a large stone pillar, covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dappled sunlight. The carvings were unlike any Alara had ever seen. Symbols of stars, moons, and constellations intertwined with patterns that seemed to shift and change the longer she looked at them. At the base of the pillar, there was a figure seated on the ground. It was the old woman from the pond, but her appearance was different now. Her silver hair was wrapped in intricate braids, and her robes shimmered with the same ethereal glow that radiated from the meadow. She was no longer simply a guide in Alara's dreams, she had become something more, something ancient, and Alara felt an overwhelming sense of reverence as she approached. "Welcome, child," the woman's voice resonated, warm and welcoming, like a melody carried on the wind. "I've been waiting for you." Alara's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I've seen you before, in my dreams. But this place, it's different." "What is this place?" The woman smiled softly, her eyes twinkling like stars. "This is the heart of the Dreamer's Meadow, where the dreams of all who wander here are woven together. I am the keeper of this place, the one who watches over the dreams, the ones that guide the lost, the forgotten, and those who seek peace." Alara's heart raced. "But, why me? Why am I here?" The keeper's gaze softened, and she motioned for Alara to sit beside her. "The dreams you seek, child, are not so easily understood. You are here because you have reached the crossroads of your own journey, and this meadow is where your heart finds its way home. Here, you will learn more than you could ever imagine, about yourself, about the world, and about the choices that lie ahead." Alara sat beside the keeper, her heart both heavy and light at the same time. She felt as though she were standing at the edge of a vast, unknown world, and this keeper, this mysterious figure, held the keys to understanding it. "What must I do?" Alara asked, her voice trembling slightly. How can I find my way? The keeper nodded, her gaze distant. The path you seek is not one of certainty. It is a path of discovery, of choosing what you hold dear. But there is one thing you must always remember: your dreams are not just fantasies. They are powerful, and they are real. And with them, you hold the power to change the course of your own life, and the world around you. Alara's mind was racing. But how? How can I change anything? The keeper turned to her, her expression serious. You must first understand that everything begins with a choice. And that choice, no matter how small, can ripple out into the world in ways you cannot yet see. There are many paths, many futures, but the one you choose will be shaped by your heart. Your dreams will lead you if you allow them to. Alara's gaze drifted to the stone pillar in front of her, its carvings glowing softly as if calling to her. She could feel the weight of the keeper's words settling into her chest, filling her with a deep sense of responsibility. The choices she made here, in this place, would echo far beyond the meadow. She couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. What if I'm not ready? Alara asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The keeper's gaze softened. There is no true readiness, child. Only the courage to take the first step, even when the path is unclear. You have already begun your journey, and you will continue on it, step by step. Alara took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She could feel the dreams of the past few days swirling within her, as though they were all leading her towards something, a truth she had yet to understand. And though the path ahead seemed uncertain, there was something within her, a spark, that told her she was capable of facing whatever lay ahead. The keeper smiled, as if reading her thoughts. Go, child. The path is yours to follow. And know this, no matter where you go, you are never alone. You carry the dreams of this meadow within you. Alara stood up, her heart racing as she looked around the grove. The keeper remained seated, her eyes never leaving Alara's face. It was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. But where to begin? What path would she take? The answer came to her as though a gust of wind had swept through her thoughts. Trust the dreams. The words echoed in her mind, a reminder that her own dreams, her deepest desires and fears, held the answers she sought. But the burden of those dreams was not one she could carry lightly. As she turned to leave the grove, a feeling of unease washed over her. What if the dreams she sought were too powerful, too dangerous? What if the choices she made would change everything in ways she couldn't comprehend? But there was no turning back now. The meadow had called her, and now, it was time for her to answer. The moment Alara stepped away from the stone pillar and the keeper's guiding presence, the meadow seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that hummed like the pulse of the earth itself. The sun was rising higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the grass. But the light felt different now, as though it were illuminating more than just the surface of the meadow. It was showing her the heart of this place, and the deeper truths hidden within. As Alara walked further into the meadow, the path before her began to split. She stopped, her heart pounding. Each direction seemed equally compelling, and yet each felt completely different. One path led toward a dark, dense forest, where the trees grew so close together that the light barely filtered through their leaves. The other path led to a shimmering lake, its surface glowing with a soft, inviting light. Alara felt a familiar tug at her heart. The dreams she had seen before. The visions of the sea, the storm, the shadowy figure, flashed in her mind. Which path was the right one? Should she venture into the dark forest, or seek the tranquil waters of the lake? She remembered the keeper's words. Your dreams will lead you if you allow them to. But that meant trusting in her heart, her instincts, the very dreams that had been guiding her thus far. With a deep breath, Alara made her choice. She stepped toward the lake. As she approached the water, the ground beneath her feet grew softer, the earth giving way to cool, silken sand. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and she noticed that the birds had grown quiet. There was an eerie calm here, as though the very world held its breath in anticipation of what would happen next. She stood at the edge of the lake, gazing at its surface. The water was clear, almost unnaturally so, reflecting the sky, the trees, and her own image. But as she stared at her reflection, she saw something strange. Her own eyes, normally bright and full of life, seemed dull and tired, as though she had not been the same person who had first wandered into this meadow. With a sense of unease creeping up her spine, Alara knelt by the water's edge. She reached down to touch the surface, but before her fingers made contact, the water began to ripple. Slowly, the ripple spread outward, distorting her reflection. The images on the surface began to shift, swirling like a whirlpool of memories and dreams. Alara recoiled, heart racing. The pond from the night before, the one where she had seen the visions of her future, was now mirrored in the lake, but something was different. The lake's surface was darker, deeper, and more ominous. She saw flashes of the stormy sea again, the ship caught in the violent waves, but now, there were figures aboard, people she had never seen, their faces twisted in agony and fear. The figure in dark robes stood at the helm, his lantern flickering in the storm, his shadow growing longer and darker with each passing wave. "Is this the future?" Alara whispered to herself, her voice shaky with fear. She heard a soft, melodic voice from behind her. "Yes, child. It is one of many possible futures." Alara spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The keeper stood there, now dressed in a flowing robe of silver and deep blue. Her face was serene, but her eyes held a deep sadness, as though she knew things Alara could not yet understand. "You've come to see it, haven't you?" the keeper asked, her voice calm, though there was a weight to her words. "The future you saw in the pond, the one that calls you to the sea. It is only one of the paths you might walk." Alara's gaze darted between the keeper and the lake, her pulse quickening. "But how do I stop it? How do I change what I've seen?" The keeper shook her head gently, her long silver hair flowing with the movement. "You cannot change the future by running from it. The future is not fixed, child. It is shaped by the choices you make in the present. The path you have chosen to walk leads to the sea, but that does not mean you must walk it alone or that the storm will consume you." "But how do I find the strength?" Alara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do I make the right choices?" The keeper's eyes softened with understanding. "You have already begun. Your choice to walk toward the lake, to confront the visions in the water, was the first step. You have faced your fear of what lies ahead. Now, you must take the next step, the one that will lead you toward your destiny." Alara's thoughts were a whirlwind. She could feel the weight of the future pressing down on her, as if the storm in her dreams was already starting to gather on the horizon. But the keeper was right. She had already chosen this path, and she couldn't turn back now. She had to trust her heart and move forward, even if the way was unclear. "What happens now?" Alara asked, turning to the keeper once more. "Now," the keeper said, "you must choose whom you will trust along the way. You will meet others on your journey, and each will play a part in the story that unfolds. Some will guide you, others may mislead you. It is not always clear who your allies are in the world of dreams." The keeper's words weighed heavily on Alara's heart. She could already feel the uncertainty, the unknowns ahead. But she also felt a spark of resolve igniting within her. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead, with the strength she had found within herself. The next morning, Alara woke to find that the meadow had transformed once more. The serene atmosphere of the previous days had faded, replaced by a sense of urgency, as if the land itself were sensing the weight of her choices. The path through the meadow stretched out before her, but now, it was lined with thick fog. The air was colder than before, and the once gentle breeze had picked up, carrying with it the faint sound of distant voices, whispers on the wind. Alara knew the time had come to leave the safety of the meadow and face what lay beyond. She walked into the fog, the mist swirling around her as she moved forward. The path was barely visible, but she trusted her instincts, the dreams that had guided her so far. She could sense that her journey had truly begun now, and she had no choice but to continue. As she moved deeper into the fog, the whispering voices grew louder, more distinct. At first, they were incomprehensible murmurs, but slowly, words began to form. They spoke in a language she didn't understand, and yet, somehow, she could feel their meaning. The voices were filled with longing, with fear, with confusion, emotions that felt familiar and foreign all at once. And then, through the mist, she saw him. The shadowy figure in dark robes stood before her, holding his lantern high. His face remained hidden beneath the hood, but Alara could feel his presence, like a dark cloud hovering just out of reach. He was the figure from her visions, the one who had appeared in the storm, the one who seemed to be leading her towards something she didn't yet understand. The figure spoke, his voice a low, haunting whisper. "You have come for answers, child. But the path you walk is not one of clarity. There is much you do not know." Alara took a step back, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What do you want from me?" The figure's hooded head tilted slightly, as if studying her. "I am the shadow that follows. The one who seeks to guide you toward the storm. But I am not your enemy, Alara. You will need me more than you realize." As Alara gazed into the shadowed figure's eyes, her mind raced. What did he mean by the storm? Why had he been a constant presence in her dreams, and why was he now standing before her, shrouded in darkness? She took another step back, her heart pounding in her chest. But before she could turn away, the figure extended his hand toward her, his long fingers outstretched like the tendrils of a vine. "Come with me," he said, his voice soft yet filled with an undeniable command. "You cannot run from the storm. But you can choose how you face it." Alara hesitated, uncertainty gripping her. She remembered the keeper's words, "Trust your dreams." Could this figure be a part of that dream? Or was he something else entirely? Something far more dangerous? She couldn't be sure. But one thing was clear, she had reached the moment where her path would diverge forever. Alara's mind raced as the shadowy figure extended his hand toward her. His outstretched fingers seemed to shimmer in the mist, almost like a mirage that could dissolve if she moved too quickly. The soft whisper of the wind and the eerie voices that had grown louder now wrapped around her, creating a strange sense of foreboding. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, her breath shallow as she contemplated her next move. "Come with me," the figure repeated, his voice still calm, but there was a faint urgency in it now. "You have already walked far, Alara. There is no turning back. The storm will come, whether you face it or not. But you must choose how you face it." The words resonated deep within her, tugging at something she had buried, something she had feared even more than the storm itself, the idea of being passive, of letting life sweep her along without taking charge, without choosing. She had always felt like an observer in her own life, standing on the sidelines, unsure of which direction to go, always waiting for a sign to tell her what to do. But here, now, in this strange and mystical place, she realized that the storm was not something to fear. It was something to understand, to face head-on, and in doing so, perhaps she could discover what truly lay within her. The shadowy figure stood motionless, his face still obscured by the hood, but Alara could feel his gaze on her. She took a deep breath, her legs trembling as the fog seemed to part around her, revealing glimpses of the world beyond. The path ahead was winding, with jagged rocks and twisting roots leading toward the dark horizon. And beyond that horizon, the storm. But the figure's words echoed in her ears. "You cannot run from the storm. But you can choose how you face it." "Who are you?" Alara demanded, stepping forward, her voice steadier now. "Why have you been following me in my dreams?" The figure's lips curled into what might have been a smile, though his face remained hidden. "I am the shadow of what you fear, the manifestation of your doubts, your choices, and your potential." He paused as though contemplating her next question. "But I am also a guide. I show you what lies ahead, so you can decide if you have the courage to confront it." Alara's breath caught in her throat. Fear? Her doubts? The storm, was it truly only a reflection of what she feared deep inside herself? Before she could speak again, the figure extended his hand once more. This time, Alara didn't hesitate. She reached out and placed her hand in his, feeling a strange warmth from his touch, as though an invisible current had passed between them. "You must understand, Alara," the figure said, his voice low and almost soothing now. "The storm that is coming is not just a literal one. It is a storm of the heart. You will face moments of doubt, of loss, and of change. But how you choose to weather it, that is what will define you." Suddenly, the mist parted fully, and Alara saw it. The storm. It was not like the raging tempest she had imagined, but something much more complex. A swirling mass of dark clouds and crackling energy, streaks of lightning flashing within, as though the very fabric of reality were being torn apart. The storm seemed to be alive, a living force with a mind of its own. "It's beautiful," Alara whispered, transfixed by its power. "Yes," the figure murmured, "but also dangerous. And it's growing closer." Alara turned to face him, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. The keeper had spoken of dreams, of choices, of paths that could be taken, but here, now, was the embodiment of everything she had been running from. The storm was coming for her. And yet, somehow, she felt ready. The figure's eyes gleamed under the shadow of his hood. "You are not ready for the storm, Alara," he said, his voice cold and distant once more. "No one is ever truly ready. But that doesn't matter. The storm will come, regardless of whether you are prepared." "What can I do?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her resolve. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned his back to her, his dark robe billowing as though caught in an unseen wind. "You must confront what lies within you, Alara. The storm is only as dangerous as you believe it to be. Once you face it, you will discover whether the fear has any power over you. Until then, you remain a prisoner to it." With that, he began to walk away, his footsteps fading into the fog. Alara stood frozen, her heart racing. The storm loomed ahead, its ominous presence tugging at her like a gravitational pull. She knew what she had to do. The keeper had been right, the path she had chosen had led her here. She was already on her way, and no amount of fear or uncertainty could change that now. She took one last look at the fading figure, her heart heavy with the weight of his words, and turned toward the storm. The path to the storm was steep and treacherous. The ground beneath Alara's feet shifted with every step, as though the very earth were rebelling against her. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and rain. The storm itself loomed on the horizon, a wall of dark clouds so vast and powerful that it seemed to swallow the very sky. The closer she got, the more she felt the weight of its presence, like an immense weight pressing down on her chest. Alara had never known fear like this. It wasn't the fear of the unknown, or the fear of what might happen. It was the fear of facing the storm head-on, of acknowledging that it was a part of her, that it had always been a part of her. The storm wasn't just something outside of herself, it was a manifestation of the chaos and uncertainty within. As she walked, the wind grew fiercer, tearing at her clothes and tugging at her hair. The rain began to fall in sheets, soaking her to the bone. But Alara didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not now. The storm would come, regardless of her fear. She reached the center of the tempest and paused, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The world around her was consumed by the storm, the skies crackling with energy, the winds howling like 1,000 voices. And yet, in the heart of it, there was an eerie calm. The center of the storm was silent, a vast emptiness that stretched out before her like a chasm. As Alara stepped into the center, she felt the storm pull at her, tugging at her very soul. The wind howled louder, and the lightning flashed with blinding intensity. But Alara didn't flinch. She had faced the storm in her heart before. Now, she had to face it in the world. The figure from her dreams appeared before her once more, standing in the eye of the storm, his dark cloak billowing in the wind. His face was still hidden, but she knew who he was. He had been her guide, her fear, her shadow. And now, he was the storm itself. "You've come far, Alara," the figure said, his voice now loud enough to be heard over the roar of the storm. "But do you truly understand what you face?" Alara nodded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. I understand. I understand that this storm is me. And if I am to move forward, I must confront it. The figure's laughter echoed through the storm. You have learned well. But the storm is not the end, Alara. It is only the beginning. The storm seemed to pause, its energy swirling around them in a pulsating rhythm. Alara felt herself growing stronger, more certain with each passing moment. The figure stepped forward, his presence no longer as threatening as it had been before. You have a choice, child, he said, his voice now calm and almost kind. You can face the storm and emerge from it as you are, or you can let it consume you. Alara met his gaze, her eyes unflinching. She had already made her choice. The storm could no longer control her. She was the one who would determine how it would end. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. The figure stepped aside, and the storm parted just enough to reveal a path ahead. It was time to walk it. As the storm shifted, its power receding in the face of Alara's growing determination, she felt an odd sense of calm wash over her. The violent winds, the crackling lightning, the deafening thunder, they all began to lose their intensity, not because the storm had passed, but because Alara had finally embraced it, accepted it as part of her journey. It was no longer something to fear, but something to understand. The path before her, once hidden beneath the chaos, now revealed itself clearly. It was a narrow trail that wound through a dense forest, but unlike the dark, oppressive trees she had passed before, these were alive with a different kind of energy. The trees seemed to hum with a quiet force, their branches twisting toward the sky in a kind of reverence, as though guiding her onward. With a deep breath, Alara stepped forward, her feet light upon the soft earth. The storm, though still present in the sky above, no longer seemed to weigh her down. She could still feel its presence, an ever-looming reminder of the choices ahead, but she also felt something else, a sense of purpose. As she walked, she began to hear a soft murmur, like a distant whisper carried on the wind. It grew louder with every step, and Alara paused, listening. The voices were speaking in a language she didn't understand, but somehow, she knew they were meant for her. Alara, they called her name, their voices blending together in a symphony of soothing sound. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the voices. They were not threatening, rather, they were comforting, as though they were guiding her, urging her to continue. She could feel their presence, warm and familiar, as if the very earth beneath her feet was alive with their energy. Who are you? Alara whispered, not sure whether she expected an answer. The voices answered in unison, their tones gentle yet firm. We are the keepers of the path, the guardians of the dream. We watch over those who walk the way, offering guidance to those who seek it. Alara opened her eyes, glancing around as the trees seemed to shift in response, their branches swaying in a coordinated dance. It was as though the entire forest was alive, responding to her presence, guiding her forward. You are not alone, Alara, the voices continued. The storm was not your trial alone, but the beginning of a greater journey. There is much more to discover, much more to face. The choices you make will shape the world around you, and they will shape you. Alara's heart raced as she felt the weight of their words settle within her. This was only the beginning. She had faced the storm, but what lay beyond it? What more awaited her in this place where dreams and reality blurred together? The forest path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees growing taller and denser as she moved deeper. The air was thick with magic, and she could feel the pull of it, drawing her forward like a current beneath the surface. As she walked, the voices continued to guide her, their words a gentle whisper in her mind, offering reassurance and encouragement. Trust in your heart, Alara, they said. You have the strength to continue, to face what lies ahead. But remember, not all paths are as they seem. Alara's steps faltered for a moment. Not all paths were as they seemed. The thought lingered in her mind, a quiet warning that echoed through the stillness of the forest. She didn't know what that meant, but she did know one thing, she couldn't stop now. She had come too far, faced too much, to turn back. The journey was far from over. After what felt like hours of walking, the path finally opened up into a clearing. The trees parted to reveal a vast, tranquil lake, its surface smooth as glass. The lake shimmered in the pale light of the moon, the reflection of the stars above rippling gently across the water. But something was different about this lake. It wasn't just the calmness that emanated from its surface, nor the sense of peace that lingered in the air. As Alara stepped closer, she noticed something that took her breath away. In the center of the lake was a large, smooth stone, its surface reflecting the light of the stars. But this stone was unlike any other she had seen. It glowed faintly, casting a soft light that seemed to pull at her very soul. It was as though the stone was alive, and it beckoned her forward. Alara hesitated at the water's edge, the soft ripples of the lake dancing around her feet. Something deep within her told her that the stone held the answers to questions she had yet to ask. But the feeling of uncertainty lingered in her chest. She was standing on the precipice of another choice. "Approach," the voices whispered in her mind once more. "The stone will show you what you seek." Taking a deep breath, Alara waded into the lake, the cool water swirling around her ankles, then her knees. It was unnaturally still, the water offering no resistance, as though it were part of the same dreamlike energy that had carried her here. She moved toward the stone, each step more deliberate than the last. As she reached the stone, she felt a gentle pull, an invitation to touch it. Her hand trembled as she reached out, the surface of the stone warm under her fingertips, despite the coolness of the water. The moment her hand made contact, a surge of energy shot through her, and she gasped, her vision blurring for an instant. Then, before her eyes, the stone began to shift, the surface rippling like water. The glow from within intensified, and Alara saw herself, reflected not as she was now, but as a version of herself she had never imagined. In the reflection, she was standing on a battlefield, her hands raised in defiance as dark shadows swirled around her. The wind howled, and lightning struck the earth, illuminating the scene in flashes of bright light. But there was something else, something more. She was not alone. Beside her, standing tall and unwavering, was a figure she had seen only in her dreams, the tall, shadowy figure, his face hidden beneath a hood, but his presence undeniable. The reflection of their combined strength was a force of nature, an unstoppable power that rippled through the very fabric of the world around them. Alara's heart pounded as she stared at the image, her reflection caught between two worlds, one where she stood alone, and one where she stood united with a force far greater than herself. The vision began to fade, and Alara stumbled back, her breath ragged as she tried to make sense of what she had seen. "What was that?" she whispered. The voices, soft and reassuring, answered. "The stone has shown you your potential, your strength. But it has also shown you the choices that lie ahead. The path you walk, the alliances you make, and the challenges you face will shape your destiny." Alara's hand still rested on the stone, the warmth of its surface sinking deep into her skin. She knew now that the shadowy figure was not just a guide, but an essential part of her journey. The storm had not been the end, but the beginning of a deeper, more complex challenge. There was more to this world than she had ever imagined, and more choices to make. But now, she knew something else as well. The storm was not just a force of nature. It was the force of change, and it was coming for her. The air around Alara thickened, the storm's presence pulling at her with an almost tangible force. The thunder, distant at first, now rumbled overhead with an intensity that sent ripples through the lake's surface. The glow from the stone had faded, but its power still lingered in her chest, a constant hum that matched the beat of her heart. She stood there, her hands still on the warm stone, staring into the reflection of herself and the figure who had haunted her dreams. She couldn't shake the image from her mind, the two of them standing together, a force of nature against a storm. But was that image reality, or just another vision? What part of it was truth? And what part was her own desire to find strength where there was none? The rising tide of uncertainty had only just begun. The storm above her was not just a storm of wind and rain, it was a storm of her soul, an emotional tempest that mirrored her inner turmoil. It pressed in from all sides, weighing her down with its promise of change. The voices in the air, the ones that had guided her, whispered to her, and reassured her, had gone silent for now, leaving only the pounding of her heart in the thick, electric atmosphere. She knew that there would be no more clarity given to her, no more comforting words. The time for that had passed. Now, the decisions were hers to make. As Alara stepped away from the stone, she noticed the lake had changed. The water that had once been still, almost unnaturally calm, now rippled with a powerful force, as if it were reacting to her emotions. The dark clouds swirled above her, and the wind began to pick up again, lashing at her face, but this time, it felt different, more purposeful, more alive. The path ahead, toward the storm, toward the rising tide, was unclear, but Alara felt something inside her shifting. This was her path. The storm was not just an external force, it was a manifestation of her own inner conflict. And as much as she feared it, she knew she could no longer avoid it. She would have to face the storm, not just the one outside, but the one within. And with that realization came another: she could no longer walk this path alone. She turned her gaze back to the stone, the swirling water still reflecting images of the future, her future. The shadowy figure lingered in the reflections, though he was now more distant, obscured by the rising mist. Was he an ally? Or was he a manifestation of her own fears? She had to make a choice. As Alara stood on the edge of the lake, contemplating the choices ahead, she felt a presence behind her, a figure she had not seen in this place before. She turned quickly, but when she saw who it was, a rush of warmth flooded through her heart. Standing in the clearing just beyond the lake's edge was a woman, tall and strong, with hair as dark as the night sky and eyes that glimmered with the wisdom of ages. She was clothed in a flowing robe of soft emerald green, her face serene yet filled with a quiet strength. "Alara," the woman said, her voice rich and calming, like the sound of a river flowing gently over smooth stones. "You have come far, child." Alara's heart skipped a beat. The woman's presence was one she felt in the deepest part of her, familiar, comforting, like the warmth of home. She had seen this woman before, though never in the same way. I know you," Alara whispered. The memories flooded back. Memories of a place she couldn't quite place, of voices singing around a fire, of a life that felt so distant now, as if it were only a dream. "You're my mother?" The woman smiled softly, her gaze never wavering. "I am the echo of your past, the keeper of what you once were, and what you are becoming." She took a step closer, and Alara's breath caught. "You've traveled far to find yourself, Alara. But now, you must decide who you wish to become." The lake shimmered behind them, the reflection of the woman's image rippling across the water, her dark hair flowing in the wind, her eyes glowing softly. Alara felt a deep ache within her, a yearning to know more, to understand why she had been called here, to this place, at this moment. "My mother," Alara repeated, her voice uncertain. "But how?" "I don't remember you." The woman's expression softened. "You have forgotten much, child. But all you need to know is that I have always been with you. I am the part of you that connects to the past, to the very essence of your being. The dreams you've had, the choices you've made, they are not just about the future. They are about remembering who you are." Alara stood still, her mind whirling with the weight of the woman's words. She had come to this place seeking answers, seeking guidance, but the path ahead now felt impossibly complicated. She had thought the storm was the greatest challenge, but now she realized that it was only a reflection of the storm within her, a storm that began long before she had ever set foot in the Dreamer's Meadow. "I've forgotten so much," Alara admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't even know who I am anymore. I've lost so many pieces of myself along the way." The woman stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Alara's shoulder. "You haven't lost yourself, child. You've only forgotten. But now, you must choose. Will you continue to chase after the future, running from what haunts you? Or will you embrace your past, and the power that lies in it?" The question echoed in Alara's heart. Could she truly embrace who she had been? Could she reconcile the memories that had been lost, the parts of herself that had faded with time? The woman's voice broke through her thoughts again. The storm you face now is not just one of wind and rain. It is a storm of your own making, a tempest born of your fears, your doubts, and your desires. But you have the power to tame it. You must remember who you are, who you have always been. Alara felt something shift within her, a deep recognition that began to unfurl in her heart. She had been searching for answers outside of herself, seeking meaning in a place where the boundaries between dream and reality were blurred. But the answer, she realized now, had always been within her. "I don't know if I'm ready," Alara whispered. "I don't know if I can face the storm inside of me." The woman smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to be ready. You only have to be willing. The storm is part of you, and so are the choices that come with it." As the woman's words settled into Alara's heart, the storm above them began to shift once more. The winds howled in an almost ecstatic frenzy, the dark clouds swirling faster, the lightning flashing like a strobe light, illuminating the shadowed figure who had been watching from the edges of the clearing. He stepped forward, his cloak billowing in the wind as he approached Alara, his presence as chilling as ever. The dark figure, who had been both a guide and a challenge, finally revealed himself fully, his face coming into focus. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity, his gaze never leaving hers. "Alara," the figure said, his voice low and haunting. "It's time." Time for what? Alara thought, but she could not form the question aloud. "You've made it this far, but you have one final choice," the figure continued. "Your future is shaped by the choices you make, but not all roads lead to the same place. Not all paths are meant to be walked." Alara's heart beat faster, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean? What choice?" He stepped closer, the storm raging behind him, creating a barrier between her and the woman. "The storm you see, the path you walk, these are only the beginning of what awaits. You must decide what you are willing to sacrifice. The power you seek, the knowledge you crave, it comes at a cost." The figure's words rang through Alara's mind like a bell, echoing with the weight of the truth he had just revealed. A sacrifice. What would she need to give up? What was worth losing in the pursuit of her future? "I have given so much already," she said quietly. "But if I'm to face this storm, I will need to understand everything, about myself, about the choices I've made." The figure nodded. "Very well. But remember, Alara, there is no return from the path you choose now. Once the storm has passed, nothing will be the same." With those final words, he turned and disappeared into the storm, leaving Alara with a lingering sense of both foreboding and resolve. The storm raged around her, but she could feel the path ahead clearing. It was time to face it, not just the storm, but everything that had led her here. And so, with her heart now set and the weight of the choices before her, Alara moved forward into the storm. The wind howled louder as Alara took her first step forward, the thunder above her crackling like an ancient drum, signaling the arrival of something inevitable. The storm roared with all the power of nature itself, an overwhelming force that threatened to consume everything in its path. The dark clouds swirled with a wild energy, casting flickering shadows across the land, as though the world itself were on the brink of tearing apart. But Alara was undeterred. The figure, the shadow who had walked with her through her dreams and fears, was gone now, his warning echoing in her mind. There was no turning back. This was her moment, her test of will, and she would face it head-on. As she moved deeper into the storm's heart, the landscape around her shifted. The once tranquil meadow had vanished, replaced by a jagged, desolate wasteland where the ground cracked beneath her feet and the sky above pulsed with flashes of lightning. The air was thick with electricity, and Alara felt her skin tingling, alive with the storm's raw power. Her heart pounded in her chest, but each step felt more solid, more certain than the last. She knew what she had to do. She had faced this storm before, in her dreams, in the visions, in the depths of her own fears. But now, she was no longer running from it. She was embracing it. The storm is not outside of you. It is a reflection of what you hold inside, the keeper's words echoed in her mind. She had to face not just the external chaos, but the storm within herself. The shadowy figure's warning still haunted her thoughts. The path you choose now will change everything. Alara wasn't sure what that meant, but she felt the weight of his words. Change. She had always feared it, but now, it seemed inevitable. The only question left was whether she would control that change or let it control her. As the storm raged around her, Alara saw something ahead, an enormous, glowing figure, standing alone amidst the chaos. It was the image from the stone, the vision of herself, standing strong and unyielding in the face of the storm. But now, there was something else, she was no longer alone. Beside her was the shadowy figure, his form taking shape, standing tall and resolute at her side. Do you see? The figure's voice cut through the storm, his words unmistakably clear amidst the noise. This is the power within you, Alara. The power to choose, to shape the storm, to control the path you walk. You are not weak. You are stronger than you realize. Alara stood frozen for a moment, watching the figure. He was no longer a distant, cold presence. He was beside her, a mirror image of the strength she had always doubted she possessed. In that moment, she understood, he was not the cause of her storm, but the reflection of what she could become. He represented her strength, her fears, and the choices she had made up until now. I'm ready, she said aloud, her voice rising above the howling winds. I understand now. The figure nodded, his gaze unwavering. Then let us face it together. Without another word, they began to move forward, stepping into the heart of the storm, the very essence of the chaos. The winds roared louder, the lightning flashing brighter, but Alara felt no fear. The storm wasn't something she had to conquer, it was something she had to understand. It was a part of her, just as the shadowy figure was. As they advanced, the storm began to shift. The air crackled with the energy of the storm, but Alara felt it dissipating. The winds died down, the clouds parted slightly, and for a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of the stars above, distant, but present, offering her guidance. Then, ahead of them, Alara saw something that made her heart skip a beat. A vast chasm stretched out before them, its depths filled with swirling shadows, an endless abyss. The edges of the chasm were jagged, sharp as broken glass, and a great stone bridge spanned the gap, an ancient structure, worn with age, but still standing strong. The bridge beckoned her forward, but it was not the bridge that held her attention, it was what lay on the other side. Across the chasm, in the distance, Alara saw a towering figure, glowing with an ethereal light. The figure stood at the edge of the chasm, watching her approach. Its face was obscured by a veil of light, but Alara could feel its presence, immense, powerful, and unknowable.